This is CBC Vancouver News.
I am suspending the Surrey Police Board and putting in place an administrator.
BC Solicitor General says Surrey's transition to a city police force is not far enough along. Now a former Abbotsford police chief will oversee it. Plus,
when you're preying on people who are really uprooting themselves, that is incredibly unfortunate.
pinched by high costs and few choices, how do you avoid rental scams? And
we're putting hydrogen, one of our best solutions for reducing emissions from commercial transportation, in the driver's seat.
the BC government is betting big on hydrogen. Will it work? Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Surrey RCMP says one person has been rushed to hospital badly hurt after they were stabbed inside a mall this afternoon. Guildford Town Centre was surrounded by police tape after officers were called just after 4:30 p.m. RCMP says it appears there was some kind of fight between groups that led to one person being attacked. Two suspects were arrested. It's not yet clear what led to the violence. Police in Surrey and Burnaby are trying to figure out what led to two deadly crashes involving pedestrians over the past day, one of them believed to be a hit and run. Burnaby RCMP says a woman was struck and killed on Hastings Street and Madison Avenue, west of Willingdon, at 11 this morning. Police say they have identified the vehicle involved. Meanwhile, Surrey Mounties are looking for video and witnesses after an 81-year-old man was hit near 120A Street and 75A Avenue just last night, just before 7. He did not survive. Police say it appears the victim was crossing the road when he was hit, and the driver took off. Surrey has endured a bumpy transition from the RCMP to a city police force, and now there is another curve. The province is suspending the entire Surrey Police Board and appointing an administrator. Solicitor General Mike Farnworth claims the city is dragging its feet on the transition from the Mounties to the Surrey Police Service. Mayor Brenda Locke campaigned on stopping that move during the last civic election. Farnworth then ordered and legislated that it continue. And today, Farnworth suspended the force's civilian oversight body and replaced it with administrator, former Abbotsford Police Chief Mike Surr.
The mayor has her views on this transition, and I've made it clear that the transition will continue. There are some outstanding issues that I'm particularly concerned about. For example, budgeting for this year and for the coming year.
Farnworth says the suspension is temporary and the board will be reinstated. An SFU criminologist who supports the transition says recent Police Act changes allowed Farnworth to make that switch.
I hesitate to use the word crafty, but it's a crafty move. It involved a lot of forethought, and I think that's great.
Mayor Locke says the change completely removes civilian oversight, and she will still fight the transition. Surrey Police Chief Norm Lipinski says he looks forward to working with Surr. And the Surrey Police Union thanked the board for its work, but says the time has come for the police transition to be sped up. The provincial government is making a big investment on the most abundant element in our universe. Hydrogen will fuel 6 new commercial trucks in BC and a move to slash emissions in the transportation sector. But as Michelle Gassoub reports, some are not embracing the hopes for hydrogen.
The province is banking big on hydrogen.
We're putting hydrogen, one of our best solutions for reducing emissions from commercial transportation, in the driver's seat.
And spending $16 million on 6 hydrogen fuel cell trucks like this one. The plan? Produce hydrogen at an H-Tech production facility in Burnaby, then transport it through Power Cube trailers to a dedicated hydrogen fueling station in Tsawwassen.
We are looking at bringing hydrogen to market in the next 2 years, which is really, again, a pretty short time if you really think about a 120-something-year-old industry, to do a complete step change in that short a time.
The province says a shift to hydrogen trucks will help BC reach net zero. BC's transport sector is currently responsible for around 25% of provincial emissions, but the challenges of scaling up will be big.
You could expect that a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle is roughly 3 to 4 times the cost of a diesel vehicle.
BC has centered itself as a leader in hydrogen technology. In 2021, it became the first province to introduce a dedicated hydrogen strategy. Isolating hydrogen takes a lot of energy. Green hydrogen is produced from renewable sources, blue from non-renewable sources, and gray from fossil fuel sources. That hydrogen does not have low carbon intensity.
I view this as more of an economic development announcement program rather than something that's going to have meaningful impacts on climate change.
Brower says every move to cut emissions is needed, but not all projects have worked. BC previously invested in 20 hydrogen buses in Whistler for the Olympics. They were eventually sold.
I'm quite skeptical that even in the next 20 years or so, where things are going to take off. And at the same time, we don't have a lot of time, and there's lots of things that are really less innovative, just stopping waste, stopping inefficiencies.
There are currently 5 hydrogen fueling stations in BC, 3 in the Lower Mainland, 1 on Vancouver Island, and 1 in Kelowna. More will be needed to bring hydrogen-fueled trucks to BC roads. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Still with transportation, TransLink and the Mayor's Council has made the latest step in its Access for Everyone plan.
Through this plan, we're seeking funding to add up to 9 new BRT routes throughout the region, and today we're excited to have identified the first 3 to move forward.
Those 3 corridors will be Metro Vancouver's first bus rapid transit routes. They'll run along King George Boulevard from Langley Township to Haney Place and from Metrotown and Burnaby to the North Shore. The Mayor's Council says those locations were chosen based on ridership potential and future housing growth. It aims to create 9 routes over the next decade. Should one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Vancouver become more open? As we told you yesterday, Vancouver Council has said no to a motion meant to boost density in Shaughnessy. Justin McElroy looks at the arguments made against it and why they didn't sit well with some.
Can you make changes to a wealthy neighborhood without causing tension? This week, Vancouver Council voted against a motion that asked staff to come up with a plan to increase density and retail services to Shaughnessy. Now, councillors from the ruling ABC party argued that the motion was redundant because of work happening at a local and provincial level to add density throughout the city, not just Shaughnessy. But they also said this.
I think the motion is actually divisive. I think it's a purely political, purely divisive.
I have to wonder, is this just purely to divide the city?
It feels like it's an effort to try and make this more of a way to divide the city.
But politics is often divisive. Housing in Vancouver is especially divisive. And Shaughnessy is a neighborhood with its own special zoning code. In other words, it would be hard to propose any changes to Shaughnessy that wouldn't be divisive. Now, to be fair to councillors, staff are working on a lot of citywide initiatives that could include Shaughnessy. And they did tell councillors that their plate is already pretty full. But then, council immediately added 2 more things to that plate. One motion to study more density close to schools, and one motion to study how the city can directly create middle-income housing. Of course, those motions came from the governing ABC party, while the Shaughnessy motion came from opposition councillor Christine Boyle. Now, you could say pointing that fact out is divisive, or just politics 101. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's Labour Minister has announced new policy changes for gig workers like Uber or DoorDash delivery drivers, promising more protections.
First, we will establish a minimum earning standards that equals to 120% of BC general minimum wage, in addition to tips, to be applied to the time that the workers are engaged.
With minimum wage at $16.75 an hour, that's about $20 an hour during the time drivers are actively working. The proposal also stops companies from withholding tips, adds transparency around earnings, provides review processes if driver accounts are suspended, and gives WorkSafe BC coverage. Arlie-Anne Young was at the announcement this afternoon and spoke with 2 workers who've been pushing for changes.
I'm not positive. Like, after 2 years, still they don't even understand. This is a professional job, what we are doing, spending like this much time on the apps. I have to take care of my parents. I can't even spend 2 hours like in a week with my father. If you're doing a professional job, what would be your minimum like standard salary? at least we get like $30 to $35 total. Then we can deduct like all the expenses, all the things.
Yeah, so what were you going to show me?
Yeah, I want to show you one thing. This is my total income for 4 days. 379 total income.
When the legislation, if it passes as it stands, it would about double.
That's what I'm expecting. Even the thing is, we are living in the most expensive city. Can we survive like this?
Right. So even if it doubles, you don't think that it would be enough.
Yeah.
So Indiraj, I wanted to hear from you as well. So, what was your reaction? Did you know about some of the details that were about the changes that were coming ahead of this?
No, I did not.
Okay. So the 120%, so that means about $20 minimum wage. What did you think of that?
I think that's a start. It's definitely not that's going to bring us at par with our even costs of operation in general. I mean, Kuljit is right, like having around a $35 hourly rate, which is again, there's definitions, you've got engaged time, non-engaged time and whatever, those need to be clarified, but that will at least start giving us a little bit in our pocket. And when Kuljit was mentioning about benefits and dental expenses and whatnot, so that's, I feel, well, a little too further ahead in terms of we just want the basic stuff like, what if my car gets broken down? I'm not being paid at all. What if I have, a doctor's appointment someday? I'm not being paid. So sick pay, vacation pay, we're entitled, we work 7 days, at least 10 to 12 hours. So, right? So we need to have a break for everyone's safety, in fact. So that's why I was nodding to what you were saying.
This ABC's Leanne Young reporting. The province says it will look at overtime, statutory, as well as sick pay in the future. It expects the new legislation to be brought in early next year. Now, food delivery company DoorDash says it agrees with most of the government's proposed changes, but thinks the 120% minimum earnings standard is too high.
This could definitely have an impact on, the cost for delivery for consumers, resulting in less opportunities and less revenue for restaurants across the province of British Columbia.
DoorDash claims the province's changes could unintentionally lead to fewer orders for drivers. Against the backdrop of the Israel-Hamas war, there was a joyful reunion in Vancouver tonight as a father's desperate bid to get his 2 kids safely out of Gaza finally succeeds after years and continents apart. Yvette Brend was there to see the emotional moment they were reunited.
For Mohammed Fayad, it's been a month of agony with his kids trapped in Gaza. Moments before finally seeing them, his emotions are overwhelming.
I will be so happy. There's no word to describe how will be my feeling, yeah.
They're safe in Canada.
This is my son, my daughter.
Almost 2 years ago, Fayad arrived here as a refugee. Since then, he's been working to bring his kids over too. They've been living with family in Gaza. When the war broke out after October the 7th, his mission became frantic.
I am very concerned about their safety. And I am very worried and fear that I'm going to lose them at any moment.
Last week, the news he'd been waiting for.
I received a call from my daughter to say, no, now we are safe, we are in Egypt, and Canadian Embassy take care of us. And that time I feel like, oh my God, I start crying.
The kids had crossed safely through the Rafah border checkpoint with a group of Canadians. 14-year-old daughter Qamar spoke to CBC News in Cairo. She says she's fine now because she's in a safe place, but not fine because she left her people behind.
Okay.
Back in Canada, Fayad could only wait until today. After the joy of this reunion, the challenge of adjusting to a new life outside the war zone.
These children have both witnessed and experienced trauma, starting from whatever may have happened in their family of origin, with their separation from their father, as well as everything that they've been exposed to most recently.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
But for now, their father is happy to dream of a new life and new roots. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
The increasingly expensive housing market may be causing a rise in rental scams. After the break, we'll learn about the red flags you need to know about. Stick around. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Thanks for being here. Campus leaders at 2 Eastern universities are sounding alarms about food insecurity among post-secondary students. Madeline Smith visited the campuses. Here's what she learned.
A little bit of savings put away already. So that's helped a little bit, but I'm burning through that.
10 years after finishing his first MacEwan program, Matt Krause is back at the university, this time studying to be an accountant. And he says financially, it's a completely different experience.
I think now everything's just kind of risen, 20, 30% in costs. Things like fast food. Students always relied on fast food for being cheap food, meals, but everything is expensive now. So
between grocery inflation, rising rent, and tuition increases, students say they're feeling the pinch. And many are turning to campus support organizations for help.
But it's not enough. We try to do what we can, but we can only do so much. They're looking at, do I buy a textbook or do I get my next meal? Like, there really is decisions like that happening.
Here at MacEwan, the pantry hands out free food hampers to students every 2 weeks. They've had to triple their budget due to rising demand.
It's pretty bad, and a lot of those students are international students, students who don't have the supports that they need.
For students at the University of Alberta, it's the same story. The Campus Food Bank is dealing with their busiest fall ever, and they say that's not sustainable.
Right now, the stockroom is beautiful. It's full of colorful food, but in probably a month, it'll be empty again. We just had our trick-or-treat food drive, which brought in about 5,000 pounds of food, but we're giving out about 5,000 pounds of food per week.
The Campus Food Bank used to rely only on donations. Now, they spend $10,000 every month buying food for students in need. They set a new record in March, helping more than 1,600 students with groceries, and say they're already seeing similar numbers this fall.
5 years ago, we would have never expected to be in a position like this. We were around 200, maybe. That was the top of the number of people that we were serving every month.
Students who use the food bank say they're taking on more debt to meet expenses, and sometimes sacrificing their health.
Foregoing proper meals just to be able to afford your rent, your utilities, your tuition.
Without the food bank, I wouldn't be able to right now pay rent and pay for food and pay just for regular things.
The Campus Food Bank says it's generally booking up a few weeks in advance and has stepped up fundraising efforts to meet demand. But if this is the new normal, they worry whether they'll be able to keep up. Madeline Smith, CBC News, Edmonton.
It is no secret that parts of BC's rental market are very challenging, making it tough to find a place that checks all your boxes. With rising desperation comes a rise in scamming. Our Maurice Katz spoke with an expert about those most vulnerable and how you can avoid a trap.
If you're looking at a rental posting like this that's way under market, you're probably looking at a rental scam. We know that the cost of rents in BC are at the highest they've ever been, with one bedrooms going for over $3,000 a month, which makes rental scams like these feel way worse. And when speaking to the experts, that housing crisis, that rental crisis, is what's making rental scams that much more prevalent and predatory.
Rental scams are definitely, they are almost affecting the most vulnerable. Someone who's looking for a new home. Rental properties are, hard to come by, especially ones that fit your budget and what your needs might be. And the reality is that this is a big ticket item. We look at the median dollar loss, which is kind of that midpoint. It was $1,600 in 2022. That's a lot of money for most people, especially those who are either going to a new location or, maybe traveling for school even. When you're preying on people who are really uprooting themselves, that is incredibly unfortunate.
So are rental scams actually more common?
It is on the rise across the nation, and there is a housing market crunch across the nation, right? Especially in the metros. And we need to be mindful that as people move, especially if they're moving from a different province to another location, they're not always there in person, and that creates a lot of opening and gaps for scammers to come in.
Can you tell us an example of a rental scam?
We recently saw a consumer who was moving from another province, and so they were coming from Alberta, they were coming to Vancouver, and they were looking for new space for themselves, their partner, and their dog. And they thought they had found it, right? So they had a conversation with the suspected property manager. They saw pictures. They did a bit of Google searching themselves. I mean, they did a little bit of due diligence. They looked up the photos, and the photos matched the property address. And so they thought, this seems great. The suspected property manager even offered to pick them up from the airport. So they sent over what seemed normal, right? First month's rent, security deposit, pet deposit, and thought everything was great. As they got closer to the time and they were trying to arrange that pickup or, get more information, they lost contact. So they weren't picking up, they weren't responding, and all of a sudden they realized they'd been duped. So this is really that stereotypical example of you have to see what you're purchasing. You really want to do your due diligence to the next level. And there were a number of red flags within this story that are hidden in plain sight.
Let's talk about some of those red flags. How can we avoid them?
If you do a reverse image search and you look at these images, are they popping up in more than one location? That's a red flag. In this last story, they were using a personal email. So they sent their security deposit to a personal email. That's a red flag. If they're working for a formal company, they're going to have a legitimate email address that goes back to that website. On the contract, they had a GST number. Again, seems legitimate. But if you go to the Government of Canada website and you review that GST number, it's actually no longer active. It's not for that company. And so you really want to do an extreme level of due diligence. But the thing here that is number one and paramount is you have to send someone to see a space in person. So if you can't, come into town by yourself, send a trusted friend, a family member, a colleague, anyone that you trust to go see the space and have that conversation face to face so that the person you're dealing with is legitimate and the space is legitimate.
If you've ever been affected by a rental scam, you can go to the Better Business Bureau's Scam Tracker tool. Maurice Katz, CBC News, Vancouver.
There is a live shot of downtown Vancouver looking over Burrard Inlet towards the North Shore. Another crisp, cool day across the south coast. Darius Badavi will have your BC-wide forecast as we head into the weekend and an update on our lingering drought situation. Stick around.
So I joined the military in 1994. I joined the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. I've got 3 overseas operations, 1st Battalion, all the way. We have 20 tiny homes, approximately 300 square feet. The whole purpose is to give transitional subsidized housing to veterans who need that soft landing and give them a safe, secure, healing environment so that they can carry on with their civilian life. And as you can see, when they come in, it's a nice secure unit. So what we're trying to provide is transitional independent living, where the resident doesn't have to worry about anything. They can cook for themselves, clean for themselves, they have a bed to sleep in. It is so important for veterans to have that, quote, base of operations that they can work out of to help them transitioning into civilian life. Some are on the streets, some are referred to us through Veterans Affairs, Vets Canada, and other organizations, and some just call us up directly. We want to try and get them all the assistance they need so they can carry on with their lives in that 12-month transition. The whole concept is that community living, similar to a barrack block, where you have everybody in their own units, their own rooms. They can live independently, but then they can come and go as they please. If they want to get together, they can go to the resource center and go to and have that Sunday dinner together. It's a general resource center where we can hang out. We have a TV in there, we put on movies, but it gives them that togetherness. Some have jobs, some are still using the Veterans Affairs to assist them, some are going back to school, which is a good thing. We are succeeding, that they come in, they get that soft landing, they get the supports they need, and then they carry on, and they get that little bit of a breather.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Join us for CBC British Columbia's annual Food Bank Day on December 1st. We're making the season kind with a special day of programming, all in support of local food banks across BC. This year, for the first time ever, you can watch our live stream of the day on CBC Gem and at cbc.ca/foodbankday. We'll see you on December 1st.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Doris Madavi is here with our province-wide weather forecast. And Doris, first, what is the latest on the drought situation in BC?
Right, so we have had some change, but it's quite minimal. Now, the drought conditions that we've been seeing across the province, I think the fact that they've been so slow to change over the last few months, even as we've gotten cooler and wetter weather, is a good indication of just how severe a drought situation we have been in. Now, you can see we have improved a little bit on the north coast, Haida Gwaii, and down here in the Similkameen Basin, but generally speaking, we're looking pretty similar to where we were last week, although I will agree that having a little bit less of the red makes it look a little bit less scary, but definitely still not looking too great. Now, as we look ahead, there is some precipitation coming to the province, quite a bit here on the coast. You can see that we do have quite a bit of moisture streaming in already. Now, we are expecting, we've already seen close to 100 millimeters of rain fall on parts of the north coast. We're expecting to continue to see around Prince Rupert up to 150 millimeters of rain by tomorrow. So some incredible rainfall amounts coming to that part of the province. Meanwhile, the model data has shifted. So remember yesterday we were talking about how the models weren't in agreement. Well, they've now sort of started to shift the rain coming to the south coast later and later tomorrow. So now it's not the morning that we see that rain come to the west coast of the island. It's actually around noon or into the afternoon. And then it's not until late Saturday night that we see that come here to the lower mainland. So quite a bit of change once again in these models. I'm not showing the one that we looked at yesterday because it is also slowly starting to shift later in the day as well. But this seems to be the weather story that we're going to see. If we look at the accumulation over the next 48 hours, you can see that considerable rainfall up here in the north. But keep in mind, again, quite a bit of rain already fallen on these areas. We can also see that snow start to break into some parts of the interior. But again, most of the precipitation we're seeing break in has already come. If we do take a look at temperatures, you can see we do have another cold front that's coming down from the north. But for tomorrow, still looking pretty calm here in the south. Temperatures around seasonal. We do have that precipitation on the coast, a little bit potentially breaking its way into the central interior, but that's only a chance of showers really around Prince George. The rest of the central interior looking pretty dry. And here in Vancouver, you can see dry tomorrow. That rain comes late Saturday, potentially sticking around to Sunday morning, but not too likely. And then we got another dry start to next week.
Okay, thanks very much, Darius. And that is your late news for Thursday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news at any time, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Have a good night.